Awesome. So a bit about Charge at Home. Charge at Home is a free resource for multifamily decision makers related to EV charging at their properties. Some of the offerings we have include detailed market segmented EV installation toolkits for a variety of segments. We also have an EV charging project builder tool designed specifically for multifamily properties. I encourage you to check that out. We'll be dropping our website. You can kind of play around with. We'll drop it into the chat here. We also have educational one-pagers related to EV charging for multifamily folks. We have awesome case studies like the one we're about to go over today. We have communication templates for property managers to their residents about EV charging. We also have resident empowerment resources for those interested in bringing EV charging to where they live. And we also have something we're very excited about, a newly launched consultation or free consultation project that'll go through the end of September. So multifamily folks who are interested in having EV charging at their property and they just don't know where to start, or they have questions specific about their properties, they can set up a free call with Charge at Home, and we will walk them through and give them guidance and recommendations about their property. So again, that's all on our website, chargeathome.org. So moving into our presenter introductions, we're super lucky to have two very great, knowledgeable presenters this morning. And Michael, I feel silly, but I might say your name wrong. Michael Rennert has a background in technology, including optical fiber, test, and measurement equipment, and embedded computers. He has been working in commercial and industrial efficiency for 14 years. Michael holds a BS in mechanical engineering from Carnegie Mellon University and an MBA from Syracuse University. He is a regional manager for Conserve Energy, LLC, a contractor specializing in energy efficiency and related projects in the Pacific Northwest. So welcome, Michael. We also have Zandy Cox, who is the president of Cox Electric, a certified women business enterprise and disadvantaged business enterprise contractor located in Salem, Oregon. Since founding the company in 2010, Zandy has been dedicated to building a strong and innovative electrical contracting business. In addition to her role at Cox Electric, she serves as the chairperson of the IETT. So thank you, Zandy, for being here. And with that, we will jump right into our session and hand it off to Michael.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Hello, everyone. So today we're going to do a case study about adding EV chargers to a condominium building here in Portland. And we'll start out with the customer requirements and what options we looked at to meet them. So Anna, if you could move to the next slide, please. There we go. So this is a 60-unit building. It's 8 stories tall, so a bit of a high rise. It's right in downtown Portland. For these 60 units, there are only 15 parking spaces. They're all in the first floor parking garage, and they're deeded to specific condo unit owners. And that's a key point. You'll see as this plays out why that was a very key consideration in this project and something you might consider if you're looking at a similar building. So other than those 15 condo units owners, the remaining condo unit owners don't have a parking space. They have off-street parking. There is some available, not a lot, but they have excellent access to public transportation. This particular building is right next to the tracks for the MAX light rail system here in Portland. It's a very walkable and bikeable neighborhood. We got called in by some of the homeowners who said, hey, gosh, we have parking spaces. We would like to have EV charging. And what can you do to help us? And they let us know right up front that anything we proposed had to be approved by the Homeowners Association. And we'll come to that. That's another key point here that we worked with, and you will run into yourselves when you're comparing a condominium to an apartment building, a homeowners association versus an owner or a property management firm that you might find in an apartment building. Slide. So since we're talking electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging, the electrical infrastructure that's there is a very key consideration. In this case, the electrical room was right next to the parking garage, very advantageous. It had 480-volt main distribution panel there, and after Zandy and her electrician took a look at it, they came back and said, good news, plenty of power available to add chargers. So we didn't have to go back to the utility and say, could you run a new service so we have enough power for EV charging? Also in this electrical room, there are transformers to step down the 480-volt three-phase power to 120 and 240-volt single-phase power, both for the individual condo units and for an existing house panel. Each condo unit has a meter in the electrical room with either a 70 or a 100 amp main breaker. But the electric panels, so if you were doing a single family home, you would typically plug in a new circuit into the electrical panel. That's a challenge for a condo, particularly this one, because these electric panels are not adjacent to the parking garage. They could be as many as 7 floors above, up in the condo unit itself. The house panel that's in the electrical room has circuits for, there's a first floor retail, they have the elevators, common area lighting, heating and cooling are all powered by that panel. And that panel and its associated transformer were pretty close to capacity. So there really wasn't an option to add new circuits for electric vehicle charging in the house panel. So that's kind of the situation that we had. Some good news that we had plenty of power available, some bad news that we didn't have enough available power in the house panel to just start plugging in some new circuits. What we decided to do then was offer up some options. And go ahead, you can go ahead to the next slide. Thank you. Offer up 3 options to the homeowners for their consideration. And so here we go. Next slide. There. So the 3 options are level 3, also known as DC fast chargers. If you're in the Tesla world, they're known as superchargers. 1 or 2 high-speed chargers. Typically takes an hour or less to charge up a vehicle with one of these chargers. These would be shared, obviously, because there's only 1 or 2 of them between the condo owners. They would tie right into the 480-volt three-phase, but we would need a new electric meter from the utility so we can monitor how much power is being used for charging the car. So that was option 1. Option 2 was level 2 chargers. These are what's typically referred to as a home EV charger, 240 volts. Takes about 4 hours, ballpark, plus or minus, to charge up a car. And we looked at anywhere from 4 to 15 chargers. You could have gone as low as 1 charger. You can add them 1 at a time, all the way up to the maximum for this condo building was 15 because that's the number of parking spaces. These could be shared chargers, or they could be dedicated specific users. And because the existing house panel doesn't have enough power, we would need 1 or more new transformers and 1 or more new house panels to do some common infrastructure here for the charger. So that was the second option. The third option is the same level 2 chargers, but now rather than pulling power from a house panel, we're pulling power from the specific individual electrical services for different condominiums. You can, again, have 1 to 15 chargers, but this time they're definitely dedicated to specific users because the condo owner is actually providing the power for the circuit for a specific charger. And the challenge, and we're going to come to that in quite a bit of detail, is that we need a connection to the individual condominium's electrical service. So those are the 3 options we considered. And then I'm going to go through in a little more detail some of the pros and some of the cons and the response we got back from the Homeowners Association on these options that we gave them. So option 1, level 3 DC fast chargers. What's the good news? What are the pros? Number 1, these can be shared by all condo owners. So it's an amenity that's available to everyone in the condo building. They do offer fast charging if you're in a hurry, usually an hour or less. Of course, that's dependent on making sure that someone else is not already using the charger. In some buildings, there is an option to have offer these up to the public, so that if anybody who's not a resident wants to charge their car, if the charger is available, they can charge, and then they will pay, and that will help you to recover some of the cost of putting in these chargers. And also, as I mentioned up front, there was plenty of 480 volt power available. We didn't need to have a new service. So that's all good news. What's the downside or the cons? Well, there's a fairly high upfront cost. We estimated roughly $150,000 for a 100 to 150 kW fast charger. do require some dedicated EV charging spaces, right? So when you want to charge your car, you need to pull up in a parking space adjacent to this fast charger, charge your car, and then move your car somewhere else. And as mentioned earlier, we have dedicated parking spaces owned by individual condo owners. So somebody would have to give up their parking space if we were to make this work. And then we get into this interesting situation with the homeowners association and or some other entity has to pay the money up front, 150,000 or more, depending on what we put in. And then they have to stay involved, pay for the electricity as it's used. They'll get their money back eventually, but they're also responsible for maintaining these chargers and for having the software subscription that provides system management and billing. So pluses and minuses. The response from the homeowners association is too many minuses. The high cost, and particularly the requirement for somebody to give up a dedicated parking space, really made this a non-starter for them. Thanks, but no thanks. That was the response to the option number one. Yeah, here we go. Option number two. So level 2 chargers powered by one or more house panels. What were the pros to this one? Chargers could be shared by all condo owners if we could get around this issue with dedicated parking spaces. The upfront cost for a level 2 charger is significantly less than for a level 3 charger. And you don't have to pay all the money in upfront. You can do a project in phases. You could do as few as one charger to start and start adding more over time. What are the cons? Well, there's still a significant upfront cost. 50K or so is what we estimated for 4 chargers. And part of the reason it's so expensive, the chargers themselves are not very expensive, but a new transformer and panel, house panel, would be expensive. Question is, who will pay for that? We ran into the same challenge with the dedicated charging spaces. Somebody would have to give up a parking space. And then also homeowners association, or if they want to choose to set up a separate entity, has to pay for the electricity, take care of maintenance, pay for the subscription for the management software. Once again, not an ideal option for this condo building. Might work elsewhere. No shared parking spaces available was the real big problem. And then also with the homeowners association having to come up with the money, handle the payments. I've talked to other condos where they had guest parking spaces. And so that would resolve that issue. So this was specific to this building. So that's not to say this wouldn't work somewhere else. But for this building, again, we got a thanks, but no thanks from the homeowners association. Okay, so that left us with option 3. It's the same level 2 chargers, but now we're taking power from individual electric services for specific condominiums. What's the good news? Well, because we're taking power from their existing service, we don't need any new transformers or electrical panels. Individual condo owners would pay for their own installation. They have to get the homeowners association approval, but the homeowners association doesn't have to pay. We don't have to worry about monitoring electricity usage because it basically will just show up on their electric bill. It'll be monitored by the same power meter that they have for the rest of their electrical power. So we don't have to do anything with billing. We don't have to get the homeowners association involved in that. We offered the homeowners that we could include a charger, or we could just run in all the wiring and then they could add their own charger. And this was attractive if you have a Tesla. A lot of people like to have a Tesla charger. They don't want somebody else's charger. And so that was the option that was actually chosen by all of the homeowners that we spoke with. None of them wanted us to provide a charger. They said, we'll provide our own. And then a key point here, when you're looking at condos versus apartments, is that the condo owners can increase the value of their property if they have a parking space that has EV charging. The person who, if they're getting ready to sell the condo, a potential buyer will say, hey, that's worth more to me than a condo that doesn't have this capability. And buyers who have an EV might say, I'm not even willing to look at condominiums units that don't have EV charging. So there's a real return on the investment for the condo owner. Now, there are some cons. As I mentioned earlier, the electric panels are not easy to access. They could be as much as 7 floors above the parking garage. And because they have a 70 or 100 amp electrical service, there's a challenge. That's really not enough to put in a 40 or 50 amp dedicated charger circuit like you would typically do. In a single family home, it's much more common to have, say, a 200 amp service. And so you do have capacity for a 40 or 50 amp charger circuit. But with these smaller services, that's a challenge. And the last con is this EV charging will be available only to these particular condo owners who have a parking space and choose to put it in. It's not available to all condo owners. The response from the Homeowners Association, this looked like the best option if we could find a way to address these electrical challenges. The good news is I had some pretty darn experienced electricians in Zandy and her team who did come up with a solution. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Zandy so she can explain what that was and how it worked.
There we go. Good morning. Thank you, Michael. Michael Zandy Cox Electric. Michael and I have worked together for many, many years on energy efficiency and have been excited to get into this new market with EV charging. So for electrical design, where I step in is the electrical design and specification. I am working with Michael to look at what are the customer requirements. What type, size of EV charging equipment are they looking to install? In this instance, many of the customers wanted a convenience outlet or a bike charging outlet at their new EV charger location. There was concerns about security, so we wanted to have locking covers to prevent unauthorized use by anyone else that was in the garage. And then we also had some HOA preferences or limitations on our construction means and methods. And ultimately, the most important to most of our customers is the budget. For me, the most important piece is going to be how do I meet the requirements of the NEC code best practices for electrical installations. We're looking at pathways and space for physical installation, which can be challenging in some multifamily properties. Layout of the equipment locations, making sure we are meeting all of our minimum codes for working clearances, namely, again, can be challenging. Looking at conduit and cabling type. In multifamily, this is still a commercial installation. It needs to be installed to that specification. And then obviously we're looking at that existing electrical panel service load as Michael was talking about, and calculating what power do we have available that we can use for EV charging. In this instance, when the decision was made to go to individual condo owners from their condo service to their deeded parking space, the power requirements for their charger exceeded the existing capacity. And upgrade to a service in multifamily is challenging at best and is sometimes logistically really difficult and then extremely expensive or cost prohibitive. So my job was to identify and specify some, we call it load shed equipment. And there we go. In this project, we went with what is one of my favorite solutions, and that is the DCC by RVE. So the DCC is an EV EMS or electric vehicle energy management system, with this DCC 9 being the right product specification for this project. And next slide, Anna. I won't go through all the specs. That's not a lot of people care too much. This is a look inside what these DCCs look like. If you're not into the mechanics, you can read through here. In summary, this particular device allows you to take the feeder that's going from the electric meter, the sub meter for the condo, run it through this device in the same room as the meter room. Most of these multifamilies, you're going to have an electrical room in the building. It's going to have a bank of 10, 20, 50 meters. And that is where all the power originates. And then from there, it's going to go through the floors vertically to the condo's electrical panel, which is typically located inside of their condo. And so this is a solution that allows us to intercept in the electrical room without having to do any damage inside of the condo, any damage inside the building, really any work inside the building at all. And what this particular device does, once you have it all hooked up correctly, is it measures the load being drawn on that panel. So for this one, if the load, the main breaker on the condo, the maximum amount of power you can use at any one time for this condo is 70 amps. This device will measure, and if at any point you are exceeding that load, that allowable load, this happens most commonly in a residence in the evening time, because you get home and you're cooking and you're drying your clothes and you're drying your hair. And that's also when people tend to get home and plug in their chargers. So you don't want the charger to try to draw more power than the service can handle. This device will measure that. And if there is an instance where the EV charger is drawing more power than is available because you're doing all these other things that are drawing power, it will actually just pause your EV charging, come back, test it a little later, and if the amount of load being used in your condo has gone down, it'll turn your charger back on. And then if it hasn't, it will stay off, test until typically, in the evening time when we all go to bed and turn off our lights, you have plenty of available power and you can charge your vehicle overnight. This is the DCC9. RVE has made an excellent graphic here, just showing you how the parts and pieces go together. This is very similar, identical to how we installed these into these condos, with the exception of we didn't have actual physical space above the meters. But that was just, not a huge limitation. All of our space was on the wall on the opposite side of this meter stack. The concept is the same, just a little longer wiring and a little bit more conduit. All right. Now, distribution equipment. We talked about how the customers also wanted a 120 receptacle in addition to their 240 volt EV charging feeder, or in most cases, they actually wanted an EV charging receptacle. And so the only way we can the best way to do that, because we have no distribution, so a panel is the thing that, is the piece of equipment that distributes. So we had no distribution out of this meter room. We had to create a distribution point. And so this is the equipment that we identified as being the best match. We did go, even though it was a covered parking lot, we still went with outdoor rated NEMA 3, main lug type, Eaton BR series breakers. It's we're always trying to use, I would say, like one of the, name brand for, especially when you're dealing with homeowners or facilities. You want something they can go and get easily. It was small size, surface mount. They could lock it at the bottom. And just to know it had also your weatherproof, hub for our 3/4 inch EMT, commercial grade conduit installation. And here I'm just going through the nuts and bolts of the how-to. So selecting a proper for their 120 volt convenience outlet, selecting a proper 20 amp weather rated GFCI. GFCI should always be installed in a convenience anywhere you're outdoors. And then the EV charger receptacle. This is probably the biggest point of failure I see in folks installing receptacles for EV chargers, in that there is a huge difference between, let's say, an oven receptacle looks identical to this one. It's 50 amp. The only piece is that it's not rated for continuous load use. And so it is very important if you're getting into these, or if you are facilities and you're want to, self-install these, that you select a receptacle for charging that is rated for continuous load use. We don't like to use the F word in electrical, but our F word is fire. So unfortunately, we have seen these catch on fire and burn up if they're not the proper receptacle. This is where we had to get a little bit outside the box, literally. So we had a customer that only wanted to, plug in utilizing the cord that came with their electric vehicle. Those cords are, pretty deep in profile, and they wanted to be able to plug in and lock overnight while in use. And that was a bit of a challenge. The market hasn't quite caught up with the outdoor EV plug-in. There's just not a lot of options out there. So Michael and I did just Amazon shopping to find, we could still find. What we found was an RV outlet box that, was deep enough, it's still locked, it worked while in use. But when you are getting creative, you still have to keep in mind you can't use that factory plug. You have to change it out. The ones that you get for an RV are not rated for continuous use. And definitely not rated for continuous use at, the whole 40 or 50 amps that this car is going to be drawing as it's charging. So we had to make sure that we got one that would also easily replace with the correct receptacle. And then the next one is just a convenience receptacle. These are what the homeowners selected. They wanted metal for security. This one's very standard. You can find this Home Depot, Platt, any place that sells electrical devices and equipment. Then moving on into project planning for scope of work. This is just a summary of what we create and put in the file for our installers. This is the unit, this is the parking space. In this instance, we would have the owner's name and their phone number, contact phone number of the condo owners, and just a brief summary. And then of course, what kind of trade permit. Each condo is a service. They're all permitted separately. So you actually had 4 separate permits, one for each condo owner. And then the site plan on a project like this one is, we don't get too excited about them. Typically, this is only something that we installers are going to see, but you have your additional considerations. Again, making sure we have all the information we need to get a hold of homeowners or condo owners. And then some of the other parts, this was a fully insulated garage on the ceiling with a PT deck construction. And it's important that you have a good installer that can recognize these things and that can develop a scope of work that is not going to damage the integrity of the building. Things like insulation, PT deck, that you have a good installer for those. In this case, we looks like use the 3/4 inch, we call them Hilti drop anchors. Those are safe for use in PT, concrete wall anchors. We had one EV that was installed to the column, the concrete column in the garage, and the HOA didn't want us to drill into said column, so we used a pipe strap solution for that. And then for us, anytime we're doing this, we want to have a safe off plan. We are altering the electricity that's going into these condos. So we want to make sure that the condo and everything in it is also safed off before we are cutting their feeder and refeeding it through a device. So that's just an idea of our safe off plan. And that did involve, our folks coordinating with these condo owners on a day that they could be home and just assisting them to varying degrees to make sure that we don't have a small short or a small fault or anything that could damage their equipment. Anything with an electric digital readout is our rule. That could be something, even your oven, could be your microwave, all of those things, your refrigerator, anything that has a circuit board can be sensitive to even just a small, fault or a small short or a small surge. So that is how we were successful and were able to manage to do all of this and damage zero equipment in the actual condo owner's home. And then the project photos. So the first photo on your left, you are seeing the meter bank. And above that, you can see those are all the feeders that are going up through 15 stories to individual or 7 stories, individual condos, electrical panels. We didn't have adequate room in this location that was really good fit for installing the DCC. So if you look at the ceiling, you see that we went up and over. On the opposite wall, there was no finished wall. And so we had ample room to install. That's going to be fireproof rated plywood, which is necessary anytime you're putting, you don't want to be putting your equipment on unrated plywood because it can catch on fire. And so this is what you're looking at on the right photo is the installation of all these DCC chargers. So what you're seeing is the feeder for the panel coming in through the charger, back out, and then coming back up and then feeding the homeowner's panel. So it was intercepting their main panel feeder. And here we have some examples of what the completed installation looked like. A lot of this was driven by, the design of this was driven by the homeowner with some limitations with like the plywood on this column by the HOA. The homeowners wanted to be able to self-install their chargers, plug-in chargers at a later time is why we had the plywood there. So that if they wanted to get a different kind of charger or a new charger or anything that wasn't just strictly plugging their vehicle into the EV plug, that they would have the ability to buy it themselves, put it up themselves, and plug it in themselves without additionally having to hire an electrician to come back and do that. Or even if for folks that aren't, they were concerned that they were not construction savvy and felt a lot more comfortable installing these to wood versus anchoring into concrete. So on the left, you have one. Here's our little sub panel. We've got a 2-pole breaker in there feeding the EV charging plug. You've got a single pole breaker in there feeding a just 120 standard GFCI convenience outlet. And I will turn it back over to Michael.
Thanks, Andy. So in our little case study today, we have reviewed 3 different options for multifamily electric vehicle charging. So those are shared level 3 chargers or DC fast chargers, shared level 2 chargers, and dedicated level 2 chargers. In this specific application or this specific building, the solution that worked was dedicated level 2 chargers. If there had been additional parking spaces, such as visitor spaces, either the shared level 2 or the shared level 3 might have been viable options. So not to say that they won't be viable options for other condo buildings, they just weren't what was ideal for this specific one. A second point and a learning for us is some of the differences between a condominium and an apartment when you're looking at EV charging solutions. Both the buildings can be almost identical when you look at the building itself, but you get a really different dynamic if you have a homeowners association, which are just often volunteers from amongst the condo owners, and compared to having a property owner and or manager on site. The property owner and manager, they're comfortable making investments in their property and then getting the return by billing their tenants on a monthly basis typically. That's a very different dynamic from the homeowners association. So there's definitely some learning there. And then clearly one of the factors that made the decision in this particular application was deeded parking spaces and not having shared parking. And so a learning for us and maybe for others on the call is that would be one of the key elements you might look for when you're considering a new project is what is the parking situation? Are they deeded to specific owners or are they shared? And then the third takeaway is this wonderful device, this electric vehicle energy management system, solved some of our key problems or challenges and allowed us to tie into the condo unit wiring. So we didn't have to run wiring all the way up 7 floors up to the panel like you might do for a typical residential installation. We were able to tap in up front. And because it's always monitoring the power and then turning off the EV charger if there's too much load, it solved the problem of how do you put in a high power EV charger on a relatively low capacity service. So that was those two wonderful solutions that solved our problem and allowed us to do this project. And as you may have noticed, we did 4 units to start. Those were the 4 boxes that you saw in Zandy's photographs there. So it's scalable. We could have put in just 1. We could have put in 10. We can come back at a later date and add more. So we didn't have to get all homeowners to agree that they wanted it at once. And we didn't have to ask them to come up with a very large sum of money all at once. We were able to scale it. Thank you for listening. At this point, I'm going to turn it back to Anna for Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael and Sandy, for that great presentation. For everyone on the call, I am dropping 2 links in the chat right now. The link to our case study library on chargeathome.org, as well as a direct link to the case study for this project. It's summarized in 2 pages about the great work they did, the technology solution, and some of the financial information. So thank you again, Zandy and Michael. We are going to move into the pre-submitted Q&A session. So when you registered, you may have seen the option to drop a question. We collected 4 questions through the Q&A pre-submitted, and we're going to address those live, and then we'll move into your great questions that are coming through the chat. And thank you again. When you're dropping the questions in the chat, it's we love that. We love the engagement, and it's a great time for discussion. So if you have any more questions that come up, please drop in the chat for Michael and Zandy, and also my colleague Whit. Okay, so our first pre-submitted Q&A, I believe Michael's going to take a stab at this one, but Zandy, Whit, feel free to jump in. How can a tenant solicit a condo HOA to allow the installation of EV charging in the absence of right to charge laws?
Yeah, so great question. And that's exactly what we faced here was we had to get the HOA to buy in. We gave them multiple options. And clearly in this case, and probably in a lot of cases, getting the homeowners association to come up with a bunch of money up front and manage EV chargers down the road, that's going to be a tough sell. So using this solution where you have individual chargers that are paid for by individual users was the solution we came up with. It might be that other condo associations say, hey, we really want to have this amenity for all users or all owners. And so they might be more amenable to coming up with the money, maybe doing an assessment of all condo owners for a level 3 charger that could be shared. But yeah, it will depend entirely on the individuals and on what they want to do. But there are different options, and I suspect different homeowners associations will choose different options.
Okay. I'm going to jump in here as well. My name is Whit Jameson. I'm with Fourth on the Charge at Home project. I wanted to add to what Michael said. Typically for that kind of situation where you don't have any right to charge laws at the state level, you will probably need, depending on the condo HOA size, you'll probably need at least a few people asking the board to make decisions or at least allow for installations. This direct to meter wiring solution, the DCC9, does help navigate that situation, just because it takes it out of being a HOA responsibility in the future. But there can be issues with bylaws. There can be issues with access to electrical rooms, processes for allowing third-party contractors that are hired by individual residents, owners, to have access to those spaces. There's a whole setup that a lot of the bylaws when condos were made were not set up to deal with. So there can be a whole range of issues, and even right to charge laws don't necessarily solve all of these issues. Typically, the owner is just going to try to go with the cheapest route, and that can make it very difficult for the HOA to create a long-term strategy for allowing many people to add chargers. And you can see that in quite a few condos actually. They're having to retrofit around existing chargers that were installed through right to charge laws, and it's making it more difficult. I've talked with some condo board of directors recently, and they've run into that kind of situation, and it's in more places than you'd expect. So it's a very good question.
Thank you all. I'm going to move on to the next question now. Make sure I didn't switch to payment allocation methods for both capital and energy costs at condominium chargers.
Yeah, I'll take a cut at this one as well. So in terms of the capital, I'm assuming what we're talking about shared chargers, right? Because if it's individual chargers, then just individual condo owners have to come up with the money. And so there, you need to either have the homeowners association come up with the capital, and they might say that, you know, we're going to do this as an assessment, and now it'll be an amenity for all condo owners. Or if there's only a limited number, you might have some condo owners say, hey, we would like to set up a separate entity that will be the ABC building EV charger entity that we will all pay into. It would put up the money and then pay for the chargers. And then the second question, piece of that is the energy costs. And for that, if you put in so-called commercial EV chargers, whether they're level 2 or level 3, they will have utility grade metering built in. So they will measure how much power is used. And typically the way they work is you add some third-party software that will accept their credit card, and it will bill them based on the power that they use. At the end of the month, the entity that paid for the chargers will pay the electric bill to the utility, and then they will get a payment from this third-party management company for the money they collected from the users for the power.
Want to add to that, there's also sub-metering. Some condominium associations will install a sub-metering system and then link that system into their automatic billing system as well. So they can also do that. It's a lot of trade-offs between administrative burden and ongoing costs, as well as upfront costs. Some of these upfront cost systems can be pretty significant, but the ongoing costs can be reduced for residents. And of course, you can always have condos that just charge a flat fee to access a charger that's connected to a house panel, or a condo panel, sorry.
Thank you all so much. The next question, I believe Whit's gonna take this on. What sort of analysis of metered power AMI data have been performed for multifamily housing, focusing on EV loading in particular?
So this gets a little bit further out of my area of expertise, but I would definitely check in with EPRI and SEPA, Smart Energy Power Alliance. I think they have some more data on this. I know that there have been some sort of studies done, but uh, I'm not familiar with a lot of that work right now. There have been a lot of studies based on expected load modeling, and a lot of utilities are doing that kind of work to project where their distribution grid is going to be hit hardest as people adopt EVs, and whether it's managed or unmanaged. There's about a yearly or bi-yearly uh, study that comes out that updates SEPA's, I think it's managed charging, like recap, and their 2024 one is particularly good. And yeah, thank you, Emily. That's a good point. Garrett, sorry, is a really good resource there.
Great. So I just dropped EPRI's link in the chat for folks to learn more. And then we have one more pre-submitted Q&A. Then I want to move into the great questions that have come through, because being mindful of time, we have about 13 minutes left. So the next question we have is, what needs to happen before estimates for implementation are necessary? And I believe Michael was going to jump in on this one.
Yeah, so a couple things, as was pointed out and as we noticed, talk to the HOA and see how receptive they are. Is this something that they're all excited about, or is this something that they're very skeptical of? That would be a key question to answer. The second thought is do a quick survey of, assuming that you are a resident, do a quick survey of your other condo owners and see how many would be interested in having EV charging. Are you the only one, or is nine out of 10 condo owners interested? And then finally, having an electrician or a consultant come take a quick look and say, is there a lot of power available, or are we kind of pretty much at the limit and we're going to have to get the utility involved to bring in new service? So those would be three items you might look at before you dig any deeper.
Zandy, any additional insights for this question? Are we good to go?
The only thing I would just caution folks to think about is I call EV charging at home the one market where commercial electrical installations and residential electrical installations became the same market. So if you're, especially with skeptical HOAs, make sure, especially in these multifamily, that you are looking for a qualified and experienced commercial electrician. We are not all made the same.
Great insight, Sandy. Thank you. Incredible. So we're going to move into our Q&A live. Here are mine and Whit's email addresses. Oh, I forgot the .org. Oopsie daisy. So Varun, do you mind dropping our emails in there? And then there's our website, chargeathome.org. And I should have mentioned we're a project of Fourth, which is a transportation electrification nonprofit based in Portland, Oregon. That's provides services to the United States. So. Okay, let's move into our questions. We had some great questions from Emily. I'm going to start with her first question. Emily is from Arlington County. Can you please explain when level 3 chargers would make sense as a home charging solution, given the duration of being at home and the higher expense of level 3 charging infrastructure? I haven't seen where this would make sense.
I can start with this. The only time it would ever make sense is if it happens to really be corridor charging, very close to a freeway or highway. Sorry, there's an asterisk to that, but and it just so happens that you have, say, retail or a grocery store on the bottom floor in a mixed use kind of multifamily situation. The other asterisk is theoretically it could make sense if you have a valet system, but DC fast chargers are extraordinarily expensive, especially if you need a utility upgrade. The utility upgrades can sometimes range, just the utility upgrade can run from 50 to 150K, as I've seen recently. Plus the delays for installation on transformers like that can run into the year plus time range, depending on your utility. But typically DC fast charging makes no sense at multifamily. And I've had this conversation a bunch of times, but the asterisks are when it's actually corridor charging, when it's actually neighborhood hub charging, and it just so happens that you're at a retail place. You're just so happens to be at a multifamily mixed use kind of situation. But in the garage, especially when all parking is deeded, is a dangerous solution from a cost point of view, which is the reason why most condo associations really shut it down immediately once they see the costs. Yeah. Michael, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I've certainly brought it up as an option for they had the power available, they had shared spaces, but to your point, I have yet to have anybody take me up on it. So I haven't made a sale on one of those for multifamily housing to date.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question we have from Marlon. Did the condo association or the insurer set any minimum hardware or electrical specifications above and beyond the local codes or NEC requirements? Like, for example, minimum amperage for specific UL standards and certifications.
I can speak for that. The HOA did quite a bit of vetting. Obviously, for us, the electrician, for Michael, they did want everything to have to be listed and to be code. And I think the piece that they actually required, which is a little painful from an installer, was the plywood. So, which is completely code compliant, but not my favorite aesthetically.
Luckily, not too many people spend that much time in the electrical rooms. Though that is your business. That is yeah. Well, we hope people don't have to spend too much time in the electrical rooms, right?
Yeah, and then the only other thing that came up on this one is, as Zandy mentioned earlier, this is a pre-tensioned or post-tensioned concrete structure, so they're very concerned that you not damage any of the rebar inside. So Zandy showed you that picture of the column, the concrete column, and they said you may not put any fasteners into that column. So we had to run straps around and then mount that plywood mounting board for all the hardware.
Yeah.
One
Okay.
thing that Zandy and I think Michael alluded to earlier was there are NEC National Electrical Code um, compliance items around distances, or not just distances but voltage drop. And once you get into a certain distance, it's very difficult to have a project that really pencils at all. I mean, you really can jump up the price per you can jump up the gauge size on wiring pretty quickly as you get into the 50, 100, 150-foot ranges, and you can have a really hard time avoiding some of those voltage drops that would then get you out of compliance with National Electrical Code.
Thank you, Whit. I'm gonna move on to the next question. A question that I think is a great question for this presentation from Miguel saying, why wasn't level 1 charging considered at the condo? Costs less to install, much more flexible to use, could be installed to convert every parking space to an EV charging stall, all on EV charger dedicated meter. That way EV owners could charge at a reduced rate. And then drop some information about the average driver for ICE vehicles, miles per day. So yeah, basically, why wasn't level 1 a consideration for this specific case?
I can speak to that, and maybe it's a misunderstanding. So my understanding of level 1 would be 120 volt charging, which is just an outlet. I think for most customers, when they are investing in an EV charger, they want to know that they can charge it overnight, no matter how far they drive that day. Even if, 29 days out of 30 in the month, they're driving their 30 miles, that one day that they want to go to the beach and back, they still want to know their car will be charged on Monday. So that's been my experience, is that customers are not happy with the speed. It's incredibly slow. You're talking 2, maybe 3 days, depending on the car, to fully charge an EV on 120 volt power. And level 1, in my mind, it's just an outlet, right? That's all it is, just a regular outlet. So, and Michael can speak maybe more to what his customers told him.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. I mean, I know I don't personally own an EV, but I have lots and lots of friends and family that have them. Um, all but one have a level 2 charger. My brother still has a level 1, but he has a Tesla, and so he kind of supplements that by going to the supercharger every so often. But I think it's a customer preference, and most people that I've run into want to have a level 2 charger. I think for exactly the reason that Zandy mentioned.
Yeah. So we'll jump into, but yeah, so basically any charging access is better than no charging access. And just what you said, Michael, it really depends on preference. Some people want that, and Zandy, some people want that assurance that it'll be charged overnight very fast. Other people, like for myself personally, the amount I drive, overnight charging, recovering that 30 miles per night is enough for me. And I think we'll kind of talk more about that. But yeah, do you have any other insights to add before we jump into the next?
Yeah. I don't know if I'm the only person, but I live in an apartment. I have an EV. I don't personally drive it a lot. My wife does, but we don't have access to home charging at all, and level 1 charging would be significantly better. We typically leave our car for long enough periods where level 1 would work. However, I want to recognize that this situation, the condominium owners that were requesting EV charging probably were only thinking the level 2s. My guess is most of them would be served very well with level 1s, given typical downtown driving patterns, especially in Portland. But that's not to say that the request shouldn't be adhered to from from Michael's point of view. Like, the request came in from the condominium owners and they wanted level 2. Plus, with the DCC 9, you're taking power from the amount of capacity that the units panel has. So, a 50 amp breaker, when you have a 70 amp panel in the unit might actually be a lot. So going down to a 40 amp breaker might make more sense, or even a 30 amp breaker. But ultimately, like it's dependent. And going back to what Anna said is any access is significantly better than no access. As I would honestly personally know, I charged at a friend's house when we were in Bend at 800 watts. And that was enough because we were there for a long enough time. So it's really more about matching the dwell time to the charging solution. And for multifamily, I've found that level one is so much better than nothing. In this case, that wasn't necessary to go to level one. And I think they probably found the best solution because they were also able to put those costs onto the resident's utility bill, which has pros and cons, but typically is a pretty big pro, especially out here in the Pacific Northwest, where we typically have utilities that have access to time of use rates for residential rate structures rather than a lot of other places that don't have those options for time of use rates. Anyway, there's a lot of details there. Feel free to follow up with us if you have any questions. But this was a specific situation. I think the level two made a lot of sense here.
Sure, thank you. I'm so sorry. We have so many great questions and we're at time. But Varun, who works at Firth Forth as well, do you mind? He's capturing the questions so we can get back to you if we weren't able to address them. But I won't end the call immediately. For people, some of the questions that were asked, there's great answers that people have been responding to. So feel free to peruse the chat. I'll stay on for a little bit longer so folks can have time to do that. But I do want to mention, first of all, thank you so much to Michael and Zandy for an amazing presentation. Yeah, access to your insights in this very exciting case study. I really enjoyed learning more about the work that you both were doing as a solution for condominiums and other existing buildings. And thank you, Whit, so much for your support as well. But we have an upcoming roundtable. We'll have one in August and one in September, and you can register at our events page, which is chargeathome.org/events, which I'll just drop into the chat, /events. And then additionally, I do want to mention that we have the fourth roadmap conference is coming up in October, and you were all invited. I'll drop information in the chat about that. That's all I've got. Thank you so much. And just thank you to our great presenters. And feel free to reach out to Whit or myself, either through our emails or the contact us page on the website. And we'd love to have more conversations with you about EV charging and multifamily properties. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Have a good day.
Yes, of course. And again, I'll be on for a little bit if you want to peruse the chat, because there's just so much great stuff in there. So